This is a short story about a warrior named Bardin and an alchemist by the name of Razzil. Now, Razzil Dark Brew was born into the Keen family of dark brew, known throughout the ages for its chemistry tradition. Now, chemistry was sort of like alchemy, but with an extra C and a more medieval flair. None of the dark brews had ever reached the heights that Razzil had, though. No dark brew had ever shown the kind of creativity, ambition, and recklessness that he had. But when adulthood came calling, he pushed aside the family trade of potions, tinctures, and elixirs to try his hand at manufacturing gold. You see, Razzil was convinced that there had to be a simpler, smarter way of making money than slinging health potions to adventurers at the local tavern. So Razzil spent the next 20 years researching ancient texts, prying the secrets out of old tutors, and spending his family's life savings on reagents and equipment. He became obsessed with the idea of using alchemy to transmute lead or some other base metal into gold. Eventually, he had amassed enough knowledge and resources to begin his work in earnest. Unfortunately, this particular brand of alchemy was both tricky and volatile. To transmute the metal, Razzil would have to forge a magical circle in the bedrock itself, channeling energy from the earth to warp the molecular structure of the minerals in the stone. In order to gather the necessary materials, he bought up a nearby mountain, then cut a massive crater into its side. With all the proper components in place, he began his experiment. As the alchemic reaction kicked into gear, molten rock burst up through the floor of the crater, spraying molten rock hundreds of feet into the air. In the end, the experiment spectacularly failed, turning everything in sight to slag and showering the countryside with volcanic ash. Soon, Razzil found himself thrown in jail and charged with the destruction of the Mountain King's quarry. But he wasn't worried. The Mountain King was notoriously short-sighted. As far as he was concerned, any change to the composition of the mountain was a bad thing. If Razzil could just convince the king that the mountain was better off as a smoldering pile of rubble, he'd get off scot-free. But Razzil's hopes for a swift release were dashed when he learned that he was being held in a cell with a particularly nasty ogre. It was huge, easily twice the size of Razzil, with thick, matted red fur, tusks like scimitars, and a temperament to match. The ogre eyed Razzil hungrily, licked its chops, and shuffled closer to his cage. At that point, Razzil knew that escape was impossible unless he could get the ogre to like him. But how? Well, as the hours passed, Razzil got to work. He talked to the ogre non-stop, regaling it with tall tales of heroism and daring adventure. It took days, but eventually the ogre seemed appeased. It lay down on its bed of straw and started to doze. But just before it fell asleep, Razzil said something that made the ogre jolt upright. "You know," he said casually, "your breath stinks." The ogre blinked at him in confusion. "What?" Razzil went on. "It's true. All ogres have bad breath, but yours is especially pungent. Do you want me to fix that for you?" The ogre hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, please." After hearing that, Razzil went to work. He mixed up a potent tincture from the molds and mosses growing in the prison stonework, then poured it into a flagon and handed it to his new friend. The ogre sniffed it cautiously, then tossed it back. In truth, the drink tasted awful, like dirt and decay. But ogres have no concept of subtlety, and besides, Razzil had sweetened it with a few carefully selected ingredients. It looked like a vile green sludge, but it smelled divine. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ogre's eyes widened in surprise, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Before Razzil could react, the ogre leaped to his feet and roared, smashing the bars of their cell to splinters and bursting through the wall like it was made of paper. Guards rushed to intercept them, but they were no match for the super-powered ogre. He swatted them away like FLIs, and they exploded through the gates, emerging into the forest outside the city. After destroying the city guard's morale, the ogre slowed down a little to catch his breath. Razzil clung to his back and yelled in his ear, "You gotta go south, like straight south. I need those black stones from the devil's spine for my formula. Hurry up." And so they ran. They ran through the forest, across rivers and over hills, deeper and deeper into the mountains. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter and fainter, until the forest was silent save for the crunch of leaves under their feet and the chirp of crickets in the trees. At last, they emerged onto a high ridge overlooking a deep valley. Down below, nestled between the jagged peaks of the Devil's Spine, was a small village huddled against the mountain's western flank. "That's the place," Razzil gasped, pointing to a patch of black rocks near the town. "There's our blackstones," and sure enough, scattered among the boulders and dirt, were chunks of obsidian as dark as ink and as sharp as glass. "Perfect," Razzil cried, scrambling down the rocks to grab them. The ogre looked at the village below and licked his chops. "Ooh, yummy humans," he growled, already edging toward the nearest tree line. "Not now, you big lug," Razzil snapped. "I need you to help me brew my formula first." Reluctantly, the ogre turned and lumbered back to the ridge. Once they had collected enough blackstones, Razzil helped the ogre over a boulder so that he could crush the stones with his mighty heel. Then he carefully collected the crushed black stone and mixed it with several other reagents in a big iron cauldron. The resulting potion was jet black and sparkled like oil on water. "Here," Razzil said, handing the ogre a wooden mug. "Drink this." The ogre took the mug, sniffed it curiously, and tossed it back. Then he roared again, but this time it sounded different. His eyes rolled back in his head and his arms dropped to his sides. He slumped to the ground, trembling violently. "What have you done?" Razzil screamed, rushing to his side. The ogre looked up at him weakly and rasped, "I feel." "Wonderful." Then he closed his eyes and fell silent. Razzil stared at his inert form, confused. He had intended for the ogre to gain immense strength from the draught, not to pass out cold. But as he watched, a smile slowly spread across the ogre's face. He seemed peaceful, content, even eager. So Razzil helped him to his feet and said, "We can do it now. Just like I promised." The ogre blinked at him, then grinned back. "Do what?" Razzil asked, puzzled. The ogre leaned closer and whispered, "Your turn to ride on my back, little friend." Then he picked Razzil up and walked toward the village, leaving the abandoned cauldron behind. And that's all for this hero discussion. Please note that despite pacified by Razzil's makeshift potion, the ogre nonetheless seems tired of carrying his partner around, and longs for new shoes, a back brace, and less walking. All right, now let's move on to some fun facts about Alchemist's lore. First off, although Razzil was estranged from his family, he still sometimes serves as their enforcer, much to their chagrin. Tinkers believes that alchemy is an illegitimate science and thinks that Razzil is a loon for practicing it. But here's the thing. In most fantasy settings, magic and science are often portrayed as mutually exclusive, as if magically based abilities and scientific progress are somehow incompatible. But I don't buy it. Magic and science can coexist. Magic and technology can complement each other, whether it's teleportation circles that use glyphs of warding, automatic crossbow turrets powered by enchanted gears, or potions brewed with a mortar. And pestle, there's no reason why the fantastical and the scientific can't mix. Secondly, despite his impressive feats, including blowing up a volcano, Razzil's magnum opus will probably always be his masterpiece, a complex explosive device disguised as a potion bottle. It's an absolutely classic prank. And that concludes the Alchemist's lore discussion. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, consider subscribing and leaving a like. And if you disliked it, well, you can leave a dislike too. If you really hate it, you can also say why in the comments. And if you're just messing around, well, you can also subscribe and leave a like.